It is a fundamental question that has plagued humanity's existence since the antithesis of its intelligence. What is the meaning of life? The question, what is the meaning of life, is inherently ambiguous, and perhaps the most ambiguous question that exists. The one that questions our own existence. What does it mean for a life to have meaning? Does a person need to accomplish something in order to make their life meaningful? Or can a person simply believe their life is meaningful and have a meaningful life? Or is it society, considering a specific person's life meaningful, that gives that person a meaningful life? Simply by the way the question is asked, the scope changes. This makes it incredibly difficult to define exactly what the question means, and becomes at liberty of its inquisitor. What is the meaning of life is definable when asked as a personal question, where it is subjective and up to the person's opinion. When finding a universal answer for the question, it becomes hard to nail an answer that considers the purpose of every living thing in the universe. This is because the question can no longer be considered subjective or objective. Dr. Wang, a philosophy professor at Chico State University, has his own views on the subject. He believes that a life that has meaning is one that is intersubjective, or a life worth writing a book about. In this case, both the reader and the author have to believe that the book's subject is meaningful. That is, the author believes he or she has a life important enough to write a book about, and the reader views the author's life important enough and interesting enough to read about. This is the idea behind intersubjectivity, that the culture the specific accomplishment exists in believes that the accomplishment is useful, and the person who comes up with the idea believes their own work and life is meaningful. Dr. Wang also points out that the question, what is the meaning of life, is extremely ambiguous. The word meaning limits the scope of the question. Asking what is the meaning of life becomes a question about life itself and the defined purpose of its existence. It is a very different question from what does it mean to have a meaningful life, one that on a personal level is fulfilling.
Right now, I don't think we can know. Whether or not we can know in the future, honestly don't know. I'm not going to make a claim about what we might or might not know 100 years from now, or 1,000 years from now, or whatever time span you want to call it. Right now, I think we have to be profoundly impressed by our ignorance.
You've asked a Catholic priest, what is the meaning of life? And I have a unique answer. I learned it when I was in the second grade by heart. The meaning of life, why we were created, was to know God, to love God, and to serve God in this life so that we can be with Him forever in the next. And I think being able to live a life with a principle like that can give us really a lot of consolation in difficulties. It can give us strength in times of trial, and it can help to guide many of our decisions. So we're here, and we've all been created to know God, love God, and serve God in this life in order to be with Him forever in the next. And really that's the secret of happiness and peace and joy, even in the middle of our difficulties.
The most common theory used to answer the question, what is the meaning of life, is supernaturalism, which is practiced in the form of religion. Supernaturalism is the theory that life's meaning is dependent on the presence of a God and a metaphysical realm. It is not only the most common, but also the oldest known answer to what is the meaning of life. Religions were first practiced thousands of years ago and have now evolved into two basic categories, Western and Eastern religions. Each hemisphere has its own distinct outlook on the meaning of life. Western religions, such as Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, all share the belief in one benevolent and all-powerful God. They believe that since this God is the reason for life, total reverence is owed to Him, and the meaning of life is to devote one's life to serving and praising God. The Western belief in an afterlife for those who live their lives in such a way helps guide believers. Eastern religions, on the other hand, such as Buddhism, Hinduism, and Taoism, believe in many gods. Instead of focusing on glorifying an outside entity, they focus on a personal journey of faith. The meaning of life is to improve your spirituality and become closer to enlightenment. This ties in with their belief of reincarnation, as an individual has many opportunities to achieve this purpose. Eastern religions also all have an idea of a collective consciousness, which creates a larger purpose for all of humanity, to reach enlightenment and create a greater knowledge pool. Supernaturalism is known as the most comforting answers to the meaning of life, as devoting one's life to God is a tangible goal with clear steps to reaching it, and this certainly contributes to its worldwide popularity.
I would hope that the conclusion that Nietzsche drew, that the Superman should impose his answer on everyone else because he temporarily has some kind of power that other people don't have, shouldn't be up for grabs. Because on the face of it, that's a lousy answer.
Naturalism is a philosophy that took grounding in the late 1800s. It's based on the idea that while individuals themselves can have a purpose, there doesn't necessarily have to be a purpose for mankind, no more a purpose for any life form on Earth. According to a naturalist, since life evolved on Earth through a series of evolutionary events, mankind itself cannot have a purpose. Pure naturalism still calls people to give life purpose, but accept that mankind itself is meaningless. The only kind of meaningful life to a naturalist is the purpose given to oneself, through any means necessary to make one's own life meaningful. Pessimistic naturalism takes naturalism to an extreme, and concludes that since there is only a physical world and no purpose for mankind's existence, life has no value. It is the yield of an existential crisis when a person is ridden with boredom and dissatisfaction with this truth. Pessimistic naturalism is very similar to the ideas of nihilism that were common in late 1800s Russia. In Russia, nihilism was used as an excuse for terrorist acts among anarchy groups. Since life had no meaning, any violent act was acceptable. Existentialism was a popular post-war cultural movement in the 1940s and 50s. With it came philosophers like Sartre, Camus, and Beauvoir. According to Sartre, existence preceded essence, or humanity's existing preceded the question of why we exist. These philosophers were members of the Lost Generation, a term popularized by writer Ernest Hemingway. The Lost Generation grew up during World War I and formed a pessimistic naturalist view for the world.
Right. Again, I think it's one of those questions. The word unnatural is not right, but it's close to what I have in mind. Or it's an exceptional question. You know, we can just ask it abstractly. Well, what's the meaning like? Because we can ask all sorts of questions that don't really concern us at the moment, right? But I think when people are really bothered by the question, and they are sometimes, again, I go back to it becomes a burning question for people when they're in some kind of real crisis.
One unique theory on the meaning of life is humanism. Humanism is unique in that it has no set answer to the question, but rather lets each individual decide their own meaning. It focuses on human happiness and personal wishes as the main paths to finding your own meaning. Humanism values the individual over the collective and allows them to live their life however they please without worrying about it being the right thing to do. Simply living a life that they enjoy is enough. Humanism is a secular idea, as it doesn't take into account pleasing any supernatural being. However, when it first came about during the Renaissance, followers of the theory integrated it into their Christian beliefs and merged both supernaturalism and humanism. They simply created a dual purpose to their lives, both faith and happiness. Even today, humanism is usually practiced in tandem with other beliefs. It's almost intrinsic for any person to be a humanist, as all people seek happiness in their lives. Therefore, humanism can be seen as an underlying view on the meaning of life, that most people hold in addition to their other beliefs.
Yeah, sure. There might not be an overarching purpose, but there are multiple ways of having meaningful lives. I don't see why it would be ruled out for anyone in particular. Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard. It might be hard for people to will themselves into a meaningful life or something, or like to decide to do it. Oftentimes, some kind of external accidents are required, right, to get involved in something bigger than yourself, or to be inspired by an idea that you hadn't come across before. And so, there are these kinds of happy accidents, I think, that are kind of important for. So it's totally possible people might not have those. If we think of love as one of them, and I think love is one where people can have love gives people a meaningful life. Surely, I think that's potentially available to everyone. I mean, it's got frustrations and everything as well. But, I mentioned science, scientific movements or movements in like mathematics and things like that, or politics or the arts. Those are areas where I think people really kind of get involved in what I'm calling these kind of meaningful projects. And I would say love is one of those as well. And people can be involved in more than one. Right? There's more than one. Right? It's not only that there's just more than one way to have a meaningful life. You can be involved in all sorts of different meaningful endeavors.
Yeah. Camus once said, "There is only one true philosophical problem, and that is suicide." And for people experiencing existential crises, this becomes a possible option. Life needs to be ascribed meaning to answer the question, why should I not kill myself? For people who are so connected with the meaning of mankind and the purpose of their own life, they can experience these crises and develop fatalist views. In a world with an unanswerable question as important as the meaning of one's own life, it is necessary to find satisfaction without knowing the answer. People must find meaning in their own life through religion, humanistic, and personal purposes. It is because humans require something greater to ground their accomplishments and have the ability to look at our actions and lives outside the first-person perspective that we can question our value. The problem is, this question is too broad and encompasses the whole essence of life itself.